For you people who may be seeing this on tape some other time, some other place, I repeat one more again, that although I considered at one time I cannot stand here and, as it were, play to the future, I am aware of the fact that there will be people very likely seeing this some other time and some other place. But I cannot profitably try and make this sound timeless and continually talk as though I am talking to infinity. Having said that, then I'll point out to you that my song tonight initially may sound as though it is a verbal continuation from last week. And some of you seeing this at some other time and some other place may not have seen last week. At that time, I made some effort, spent some length of time, and I spoke about a matter that I described as, what if groups of people involved with such as this, specifically you groups of people, what if it were no more than a red circuit based, that is a non-mortally based pack, like a pack of social animals, of wolves, dogs, and I use that kind of metaphoric picturization to say something about the kinds of people who are always involved with social situations, that if indeed we were talking in psychological terms, which we're not, it would have been a commentary on the, quote, psychological aspects of people in groups, unquote, or if we were talking in sociological aspects, which I'm still not. Having said all that too, now let me say that this kind of activity is certainly not packs. It is not merely some kind of hormonal dominant leader with a bunch of hormonally submissive men and women. People are not mere animals, whether it be us or somebody else. People are more than the red circuits. People are more than even the socialized aspects, a kind of higher blue circuit level of animals. People are more than that. The real revolutionist knows something else, though. He knows that the people, remember that the people in the state of Israel or Bulgaria or the state of Fred or Mary, the real revolutionist knows that people, if they're made to think of, if they're made to believe in, if they're made to accept their impotency, then people will never miss the lack of change. What I was saying last week, and some of the things I've said before and some of the things I'll say later, is not to make anyone feel impotent. You must notice that life furnishes that kind of apparent information energy on almost every hand, from your job, your parents, all religions. No matter how it is phrased, if you see it in a certain way, the molecular intent, the chemical, and ultimately the electrical intent of life is to make people believe in, make them accept, and make them think in such terms through the language used, through the sound waves used, is to make them accept the notion of them being impotent. Because once that happens, you will not miss, you will not be that concerned over the lack of real change. You can talk about it. Perhaps there is some slight form of reform going on. But as long as you believe that you are impotent, ultimately, then you do not miss. You're not going to complain about the lack of real change, are you? That is not the purpose in groups such as this coming together throughout history. It is not the purpose for me to try and show you that from a certain view, even a 4D view, even a 3.5D view, to see that what people believe, including you at the 3D level, is impossible. It's all a matter of actors. Everything apparently is true, but it's impossible. that there can be no, from the 3D view, apparently closed system, which this would be, with a matter of free will, whether it be looked at as coming from gods or whether it be looked at as being an accidental molecular arrangement of the cosmos, through all the elements building themselves up from hydrogen on, compounding themselves, becoming more and more complex. It would be the gods. It would be nature, if you're inclined to use those terms, setting about their own self-destruction. The gods of the Old Testament, the New Testament, of Islam, all manner of gods, even mythological gods, if indeed they created man in some way. These forces where they have anthropomorphic imaginary pictures or not, if they indeed in some way created man, had any part of it, and gave man some sort of, quote, free will, it would be ensuring a more expedient form of chaos growth. It would ultimately be helping arrange their own downfall. Groups of people who come together like this are not packs, and they are not fully mechanical. They are not limited to that, or they would not be attracted to it. Some of the things I mentioned last week. After you've had a week, several people predictably almost got crushed by it. 1.5 and maybe 2 people did get crushed by it. But let me point out that my reference to holding out, my reference in telling you that I had lied when I said that I never held out anything because I had been holding out. That was a lie, of course. Because I haven't been holding out. No one is going to be cheated. Everyone gets what they need. Everyone gets what's appropriate. You might look back, something I mentioned some time ago, that I stole, I believe, if not from the CIA, from movies about CIAs and their ilk, the old idea of Michael Caine, some spy turning to somebody and saying, this is for your eyes only, and you can't see this other material because you're only going to get to know what you need to know. What do you need to know? All of you say, or you would say, well, I want to know anything that you know. I want to know anything that you think I want to know. Well, do you understand all the crap I've already told you? No one is going to be cheated in here, but I am going to start giving out more specific how-tos, and it's going to require that you take more responsibility, because if I now give you a specific how-to individually, or even if I just state it on the tape at a public meeting, that here is something that I want you to do, then that brings about the responsibility that if I see you not doing it, if I decide you're not doing it, if I decide you do not give it the correct consideration, then I could, as would be my ability under these arrangements, extract payment, throw you out. That's the kind of responsibility. You're also asking for more responsibility of that nature and creating more pressure to tell me that you are changing your position in this illusionary pack. There were several things that have come up again in the last week or so that I was going to use as examples, as springboards. Several of the matters had to do with people being in debt, of people taking on debts, of people being untrustworthy in the ordinary sense with life, people being connivers, people doing things that prove to be impossible, people doing things that they do not apparently understand is going to be unprofitable, and I see that they're unprofitable in a way that can harm your effort here. And I was going to use some examples. I was even going to use the example and mention again to you about me stopping you people doing the public programs of Evotech on Sunday because of the poor turnout. Of you people coming down, and some of you spending an hour or more getting made up, getting prepared, and then no one shows up on a Sunday. This is along the same lines that some of you may think you understand some of, but I assure you that there's more to it than all of you understand yet. It's parallel, it's connected to the good old biblical dictum of don't cast pearls before swine, or something to that effect. It is not simply in the waste of time itself. That is a fair 3D reflection, but there is much more. It is not good. It is not good for someone to make an extraordinary effort. It is not good for someone to make an out-of-the-ordinary effort based upon a kind of privileged information they may have, on a kind of privileged special intent they have, which Evotech fits that category according to me. Now, all of you people involved do not continually, as you're preparing to go on stage, as you're helping to write the music, helping produce it, none of you spend all of your time with your attention split on the job you're doing with Evotech and then a continual remembrance about this is something special. You do not. But it is. And it is not good for you people to go through effort like that for that kind of payoff, for that kind of lack of payoff. And so I stopped it. It is an unprofitable arrangement. But there are similar things that all of you do in life that you never notice are unprofitable. And they're unprofitable in a way that would never strike your ordinary yellow circuits. It would never cross your mind in this way. You might be irritated by them, by these things to which I am referring. You might be annoyed. You might even get angry. You might feel frustrated. But you would not see clearly yet that there are things that you should not do because they are unprofitable. They're so unprofitable there's no way to adequately describe them. Not totally unrelated to it, I might add, is why, even after my questioning and threat for us to start meeting twice a week, that we have yet to do it. I have not forgotten. I was serious when I asked whether people could arrange to be here. But the energy, the cost of what I am doing now once a week has yet to be fully absorbed, appreciated, repaid by your effort once a week. It's not an attack on you, but that is why we're not meeting twice a week. Still using the absolutely inadequate, imperfect, fleeting verbal parallel of the group of you people here and elsewhere, and then a kind of red circuit pack of social animals. Let me remind you that your responsibility, if I give you something personally to do, to be responsible for, it is not in any form a kind of busy make-do work, and anything that I may give the groups here or some other city at some other time something to do, it is never a form of busy work. It is not simply to get everybody together. It's not simply for me to try or to succeed in apparently exercising some kind of control to say everyone be here Saturday at 4 o'clock, and everybody get down and scrub the floors. Everybody wash the walls. Simon says, everybody hold up your right hand. That is not the point. Many times there seems to be so much going on that some of you have trouble even getting your dishes done and your car washed. It is not for the purpose, though, of some sort of make-do work. It is not for the purpose of bringing the pack together to try and reinforce some apparent cohesiveness to a pack of people. And any task, any responsibility I give anybody individually is not in any way, shape, or form a test, It's not a form of punishment. And if any of you ever feel distant, if any of you ever feel, and you can't stop it, if you can't deal with it, you feel that I gave you some responsibility, and it's a threat of some kind. It's a dangerous challenge, or it is a test that you do not understand the basis for, then excuse yourself from it. Because it would be none of those things. Along the lines that I said of me having a general plan to use some examples in you people's personal lives that I know about, and then in people's lives that everybody has that I know about, I was going to point out that in a way that you've got to be able to feel very shortly. Almost all of you should be responsible. I may immediately hold everybody responsible for understanding this, that if you don't act right, then you don't feel right. But the acting right is not simply on a binary basis. All religions, all philosophies, all little attempted systematic views of some common forms of wisdom could all be described validly as the attempt to dismantle man and to put him back together. It's what psychology is, history, sociology, science, physics, religion. Except all of these desires that are bred into man to see, to hear about man, hear him described in a way in which he is dismantled and then reassembled verbally. It's all on the basis of a binary dismemberment and reconstruction. It has to be, or you'd have no religion. It has to be, or you'd have no science. You'd have nothing to compare the, quote, truth with the invalid. Scientists could not tell error from validity. Religious people could not tell, the religious side of your people could not tell good from evil. To say that everyone has got to discover that you have got to act right or you won't feel right is not moralistic, it's not religious, and it's not based upon a binary disassemblement of the human psyche in some way, and then the restructuring of it under my system. Because if it was simply my system, it would be a binary system. Of course, we might be much more popular than we are now, wouldn't we? We might be a little more special and precious. And to some people that pass by this and look out the window and stick their head here in the middle, it might finally sound like it's something other than a sculpture made out of welded jello. That if there was apparently something to do, something to believe in, something to sink your teeth in, something to hold on to. So, along these lines, if you followed into this, I have something a little bit different. Or, apologies to Monty Python, maybe something completely different tonight. After thinking about this, for God knows how many seconds, I set my little self down and began to write out some stuff. Now the stuff is, as you'll see, I'm going to read it. I wrote several pages just as I sat there and thought it. They're all one-lines. And it would be closer if we were to take these literally at face value. They would be closer to a kind of two-dimensional reassembly of man. They would be, on the surface, apparent dictums, maxims of a religion, of a way to live, a philosophy. Almost all of these things I have said in some way or the other before. Here and there over the last several years, I have recently put them in the mouth of my real revolutionist. I have put them in the mouth, in the brain of my fictitious, reasonably insane man. It's the sort of thing that if this was a religion, if I was a minister, a rabbi, a priest, or a fish salesman, it's the kind of thing that you would expect someone to say, all right, here's what we believe in. Or if you were indeed a good blank, if you were a good Muslim or Jew, here is the way you would be. I've never done this, and so as I said, I sat and I wrote them. And this is the way they just went down, one line at a time, and some seem connected one to the next one. And I'm going to read them out once. Now I'm going back and read through them and see if I have any comments to make. But these are serious. I do not mean these as jokes. These are not rip-offs of Cairo. These are not simply some kind of versions of unidentified flying nevers. These are very serious, that if it, God forbid, ever came down to the day that for some reason I decided to present this or have you present it in a very straightforward binary fashion to whatever the apparent promise was, that this will take you into extraordinary realms of your mind that's more fun than alcohol, booze, any religious experience you've ever known. And it's the ultimate payoff. We cannot tell you more than that, except it will happen during your lifetime if it happens. And we're going to give you a list of things that you truthfully should apply your attention to, and those that are appropriate you should physically, materially try to do them or refrain from doing them, those that are put in a negative fashion. And that enough people have been involved with this for a long enough length of time to know that each and every one of these has a specific material validity to it, or if you do not individually know about a particular one or two, you have been involved with it long enough to have no doubt that it has validity and that someone else here involved has experienced the personal validity, the personal valid reality behind the word. That is, you could support these as being, I didn't count them, whatever it is, 100 commandments. You follow me. So I'm just going to read them since I didn't try to memorize, which sounds funny, 100 of them. When I wrote them, how come I can't memorize them? That's silly. But then how do I memorize an hour and a half or 2 hours once a week? And apparently give no indication of it being memorized. But I did write these down. So here we go. Now I'm just going to read them through once. Well, okay. As soon as I looked at the first one, I was about to already start commenting on it. But I'll go ahead and I'll try to read them through. I'll try to do what I said I would do. If I can, I guess we should all perhaps go up to the bridge and say, are you sure that you haven't seen any icebergs at all? All right, here we go. Not even a little one, not any. Of course, you could be in trouble if you ask the captain that, and he says, I do not look for icebergs, I are one. And the tip of my iceberg is it. All right, here we go. Are you ready? Don't steal or be deceitful. Stay out of debt. If you have to do harm, which we all do, you should say to ants, flies, roaches, bushes, you should say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, kid. You should say the opposite to what would be your chemical feel toward things that annoy you. You should say to yourself, I sure do hope I'd pass the test to anybody that makes you mad, to anybody to whom you feel superior. You should have no interest in other people's personal life. You should have no electrified opinions about some very specific things: race, nationality, religion, the sex of someone, their cultural background. You should treat the electrified desire for revenge as a totally uncollectible fungus debt. Don't talk about health, wealth, or age. Don't pretend to be special. Be alert, even skeptical, but never cynical. And do not curse unless you really mean it. Be brief and elusive, if not invisible. Always remember time. Do not repay friendship, attraction, lust with criticism. Always smile just before you speak. Don't bother at all with those who use the word capital G, God. Pursue your hobbies diligently. Eat, run, smile, and sleep as needed. Keep your hands off your parents, but call your mother. Hug and kiss all dogs if you personally can stand to do it. If you personally want to do it. If you can do it, do it. Don't get in debt. Look up whenever possible. Don't do interviews. Ask all birds, are you from around here? Always act and think about acting. Never talk about things already done. Never talk about what you may do. Drop all habits non-publicly. Admit to nothing. Think not of any genetic shortfalls that you may have. Live as though you're going to die yesterday. Say the word love only to those who really know what you mean. Be dull only on the surface where it counts. Don't keep useless or ugly stuff. Be poor only by choice. Always remember how funny you really are. Don't give sex a second thought. If you're lonely, stop it. Establish a secret hermitage. Stay free from all debts. Enjoy what you really enjoy with no restraint, no guilt. Don't let the blues get into your blue circuit. Always remember the joy and energy of good yellow circuit food. Don't waste anything. Debate with no one. If you're uncontrollably serious, you're sidetracked. Don't think about stuff that only has two sides. Don't be angry at a clock if you oversleep. If you let feeling sorry for yourself become electrified, you cease having a self. Look after yourself, but don't conceive of your fortunes as being only at the expense of others. Stare not. Debt not. Hangeth not around with dumb or cruelish people. At least once a day be amazed at you and this coming together. Hurt not thy back whenever possible. Be secretly better than your religion. Rejoice only slightly at the reported injuries of hunters and fishermen. Do more than merely think about things that truly interest you. Ask not for mercy, except if you're doing it willfully or if it's an absolute last-ditch stand. Stand up straight. Whenever possible, drop a few pounds. Treat everyone as your superior, but in an indifferent fashion. Keep your personal life lean and neat. Always remember that everybody does what life tells them will be pleasurable and necessary. If you do not let the chemical become electrical, then you don't think it. If you're ever asked what you believe, smile and say, everything. Pay all debts and returneth there not. Seek privileged information, while likewise seeking to give out none about yourself. Always attempt to be thinking, electrifying. More than two things at once. Don't do stuff you don't want to do. Don't be cynical regarding how other people have fun, but always know where the back door is. Share when you want to and when you can, and when you don't. Confuse not acting with thinking of acting. Treat everyone's autobiography as fiction. Get fresh air and solar food. Don't do that if it hurts. Don't be self-conscious unless you got a self. Don't tell anyone seriously that you'll do something unless you will, or unless you fully didn't mean it. Don't let yourself feel distant or estranged from this without noting that the feeling is one-sided and it's always I-based. Don't appear too scuffy or weird. Never let them see you look mad or disappointed. Don't still expect something for nothing even here. Hug somebody when you want to and don't give it a second thought. Don't even give it a first thought. Worry not about anything you've already done or anything you might do. And lastly, get out and stay out of debt. All right. Don't steal. Don't be deceitful, especially to friends. Doubly especially to anybody involved with this. You're surely all aware of the fact that every religion I've ever heard of, all well-known systems of morality, everybody says, thou shalt not steal. I'm telling you people, there is a chemical basis, and it's one of the worst things you can do, and I'm not going to play with words. If you feel anywhere in you, and don't tell me it comes from a partnership, don't tell me it came from extraneous noises implanted there by your drunken father. If anything in you says steal, 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 if anything you've done, you got to look around and make sure nobody knows about it. Nobody saw you. That's stealing. And it is poison. It is poison. Stealing is not paying a debt. If you incurred the debt, I don't care what the circumstance is, and you try not to pay it, it is attempted theft. And it is poison. It is so poisonous, it's not even worth the effort. I don't care how much you may owe someone to try and beat them out of it. I assure you, I give you my word in regards to attempting to do this. I don't care if it's $1, I don't care if it's $10,000. If you are seriously committed to this, It is the worst bargain you could strike to steal by your feeling. By your feeling. That's all that matters. Well, I say that's all that matters. It should be sufficient for you. You should understand it. But if you have to hide, if you have to change your phone number, if you have to send letters back to someone saying, moved, deceased, if you have to watch where you're going, if you can't ever go back to a place because they may have seen you steal something, or you may owe them money, that is theft. That is deceit. Forget the words. As always, they are simply smoke signals. It is simply a way for me to move the air between what I understand about this through life, from life, to try and move the air to affect a molecular change in you. There's opportunity for molecular change in an unusual way in you going through your eardrums in this case. Of course, visually through my charming appearance and my waving my hands and whatever we're doing here, but to verbally rearrange the molecules. And so the reality is what I am, of course, pointing towards, not the word theft, not the word deceit, because every religion in the world condemns them. And if I'm not even better than that, you're all in terrible shape. But there is a reality behind it, and you cannot do it. I'm telling you, don't do it. I have never set this up with a bunch of rules and regulations. We have no 10 Commandments, as you know. But if we did, every one I wrote down, even the ones that got a little titter from the crowd as I read them the first time through, they're all deadly serious. I am telling you, if you were freed more or less from the confines of the chemically based three-dimensional consciousness that is common to all men, if you were something extraordinary now in your understanding, everything that I read out to you that I wrote here is, taking in consideration that words are feeble, of course, but the reality behind every do and don't that I put here would be something that would become natural to you. That is why you would be, in a sense, extraordinary. Although you might not be recognized as such, you would be extraordinary to have the understanding that you personally, the opportunity that life gave you for whatever reason, wired you up in such a way, put you in such a place that you run across this, that things are also wired up in such a way that you, and perhaps you alone, or at least you and me are the only ones you're sure about, know that you should not steal. Not because it's against the Judaic-Christian religion, not because it's against contemporary mores in our society. You don't do it because it's poison. And you don't talk about it. You might deny that you hold such a feeling. You wouldn't discuss it. You wouldn't debate it. You would not do that any more than you'd get up in the morning and attempt to brush your teeth with paint thinner. You simply would not do it. And you would know that it wasn't worthy of discussion. There was no discussion necessary. You would feel it in your very molecules, the molecular structure of you. You would know, I can't do that. No amount of money is worth it. It's not a matter of me thinking, well, how much do I owe? It's got nothing to do with it. That's just irrelevant. You should not be in debt. You should not have gotten there by stealing, by being deceitful. Now, the second one, and a little bit of humor I threw in case any of you noticed, 5 or 6 times throughout here I put, don't be in debt. I'm going to tell you something else. This is not a social comment. This is not a psychological comment. This is not a fiscal comment. But I'm telling everybody that is seriously committed to this, you should not be in debt. And if you're in debt now, you should get the hell out and stay out. I mean, stay out. Do not go in debt. I mean it. And I assume all of you know that there is nothing anywhere lurking in me, personally, if you want to take it down to a dirty level, that has anything against possessions, stuff, if you can enjoy it. But I am telling you that you have got no business. It is not worth it to be in debt. There is a molecular, there is a chemical base to this. Many people out in life, this feeling still filters through life. There are people that got a sensation of this. But I am just telling you directly, you should not be in debt. It's not psychological. It's not because it is bad for you psychologically. It is bad for you materially. It is bad for you from the molecules up. And you should bend, each and every one of you, every effort and get yourself out of debt, and whatever got you there, such as a MasterCard, is throw the bastard away. If you got to be childish. If you understood this, you ought to be big enough you could carry it around if you had to pick your teeth with. But you should not go in debt for anything. You shouldn't use it. You shouldn't be in debt for $1. Don't. I am telling you, you will be better off. Much better off. It is another form of poison to people involved with this. You should truly say, whether you do it out loud or to yourself, this is not silly. If you have to kill flies, run roaches off, you should truly say, you can say it to yourself, is, geez, kid, I'm sorry. And those, which all of you should have a little bit in common, even when I say those of you that may feel this more than others, all of you should feel some of this. I know it varies from person to person here. There's nothing unusual about that. That some of you would feel that's kind of silly, and some of you will never get much further than that. Some of you will feel this is not important, or some of you would be inclined, left to your own mechanical devices, to in fact overdo it. And you would have even flashes of imagining that you were indeed now suddenly some form of American Hindu and wear a mask over your face so that you wouldn't inhale little bugs and kill them. You can only do the possible. You're wrecking destruction from one three-dimensional view every time you walk, every time we breathe. Simply a fact. And something's going to crush and eat you. But that which comes to your everyday three-dimensional attention, that you have to finally kill some insects that are crawling in your food, or if you can't pick them up and get them outside, it simply happens. There absolutely should be no sort of joyous sport about it, and you should literally say, is, geez, kid, I'm sorry. It's nothing personal, I am sorry. And the intention being, if things were different right now, I wouldn't do this. I'm not doing it because of any enjoyment, and I'm not doing it without being aware that at this level I'm killing something. You should say the opposite to what you chemically feel. Such things as, there you walk down the street and you immediately, or when you glance down, there's a beer can, and immediately inside of you the people rise up, or your partnership, about the kind of crude curs and dolts that ride through life throwing beer cans out. And it would even seem to be justified. You might even think, if this was important, that I might agree. Is, let's hang everybody that throws beer cans out windows. Or at least I'd say, ooh, isn't that ugly? That is not artistic at all. You should go ahead and just say the opposite. Let's just say that you're walking along by yourself and you're aware this is going on all the time in your own personal way, and there's a beer can, and chemically it comes up, and this sort of thing with most people is only about that far from being electrified, of you actually thinking of it. But the feeling of how can people live like that? In other words, it is a criticism. It is an attack on whoever did that. Is just go ahead and just say the opposite of how great it is that somebody had fun and drank a beer. Boy, what fun. We're not going into if there's any validity to this. But just, boy, isn't that great? You just say something that's the opposite of what you chemically felt about it. Isn't it great that they were smart enough to throw it out the window and then take it home and mess up their car? Isn't that great? In other words, useless, almost ridiculous. But as long as it's the opposite, and somebody goes by and shouts out an insult at you, thinking, boy, isn't it good that that person is not deaf and dumb? Don't they have a nice voice? Isn't it good that they had me to holler at, or else they might have gone home being all psychologically tense and beat up their wife or a little child. Hey, isn't it great that they hollered at me? Isn't it great that they had the foresight or the insight to realize what a cheap suit I am anyway. So, I deserved it, and they recognized it. Isn't that great? You should be saying, I hope I pass the test. When anyone makes you mad. If you recall, I commented on this to some extent in the recent past. But when you catch yourself that it's about to go from the chemical to the electric, or even if it already has, and you've already thought it, that you're making some criticism of somebody else, you're feeling superior to them, the person that threw the beer can out, somebody crude enough to go flying by playing their radio real loud, and they're drinking a beer, trying to look cool, and they're driving a beat-up car, they're drinking cheap beer, and plus if it's expensive beer, nobody's cool drinking beer. They think they're it, they'd at least have champagne, they at least have a limo or whatever. But there you are, and I'm telling you, there's validity to this, is you should treat all of that when you catch it as though you may be the slow-wittedest person on this planet. I don't mean just in this group. I'm talking about on this planet. And that all of this is these other secret forces, these gods, these unnamed forces, they arrange things periodically to see how some people are coming along. And you're so far down, if not the absolute bottom on the evolutionary ladder right now, that life tests you more than once, maybe once a week. They can't believe it. And so it sends somebody. It sends, like if we were ordinary religious people, it sends by an angel or a minor godly mignon goes by and takes on the appearance of a guy in a pickup truck, and he goes by and hollers, "Hey, fatso," just to see if you'll still go and get mad. And God looks and thinks, good grief. Everybody can't be equal. Somebody's got to be the low man or woman on the totem pole, but this person will never learn. You should think every time you catch yourself being mad, anytime you feel yourself, which is always a form of feeling superior to somebody else, is you should think, oh my God, I hope I pass. What you're saying is, I hope that I stop that from getting electrical, going from chemical to electrical before these people, these spirits, whoever it is, before they caught on, I was about to get mad and fall for it again. Jesus, I hope I passed. And what you're saying is, I hope I stopped this quick enough before they realize I did it again. You should have no interest in other people's personal life. That's connected with several things I've said along the way that... Are we having problems? That you people should have no heroes. That's a cheap way to put it. Every time I put it, I almost regret that I said it, but there is no other way to say it, and then have to go into an exposition about it. You're not capable of picturing a hero. I know you think you are, but you're not. Anything that ordinary consciousness, any body, any historical figure that ordinary consciousness would perceive, imagine to be a hero, is not a hero. It's just, again, that's the kind of three-dimensional invention of God. It's you taking your own inbred, genetic, molecular, quote, weaknesses, the places where you do have a shortfall. It is your own wild duck. It is the part of you that is missing. It is the part of you that, were it completely fulfilled, you would not be here. You would be one of the satisfied humans, if we had any. Any imaginary interest you have in other people's lives, gossip, subscription to People magazine. If you find that you have, which everybody has a small piece of it at least, that you seem to have a real pressing interest to stick your nose in somebody else's life, loyalty and Hollywood or England. I don't mean just somebody you know. It is not profitable. It's not because it is psychologically unseemly. None of that. I am telling you molecularly. To read, to imagine, to daydream about somebody else and their personal life is poison. And most of you should maybe get some kind of glimpse right quick that all of you have had some piece of that and have some piece of it. And if you can ask yourself the clinical question that does not pay off in a 2-week cruise to Hawaii or a refrigerator, but to ask yourself the clinical question, what have I ever gained from this kind of daydreaming, from this kind of reading? What? Nothing. And I am telling you worse than that, what you do not perceive is, it is poison. It is a kind of continual molecular reinforcement of structures to non-existent heroes. It helps you continue to feel impotent because you imagine that somebody else has more power than you do through their position, through their inherited position, through the position of wealth or power that they may have apparently obtained through their life, through their effort, through good luck. There is nobody on the perceivable horizon, historically or coevally, that is worthy of your attention, much less your adoration. Nobody. It's a fact. It's not a judgment of humanity. It has nothing to do with being misanthropic. It is a kind of unrecognized poison that I'm just telling you tonight, point blank. It is natural. It is built into everybody. It is a part of the social fabric, you might say, inherent in the packs of humanity. But it is poison for you people. Poison. You should have no electrified opinions concerning race, nationality, culture. That is built into humanity. I know, in case you won't know that I know that it is contemporary wisdom, academic wisdom, psychological truths, sociological truisms nowadays that such things as nationalism in its most obscene forms, they would say, are culturally taught, and yet somewhere there is this kind of territorial imperative that is down at the animalistic level in man's evolutionary chain that brings this about. Now, all the way from this idea that there is a kind of animalistic territorial imperative from there to the psychological aspects of trying to feel and act superior to your neighbor and to take what's his, if you could put all that together, you would have closer to a reality. There is a real basis to feeling nationalistic. It's not just rednecks staying on the corner down in Alabama. It's not just them that cry when they see the American flag go by, or that holler out, we ought to run everybody out of this country that wasn't born here. There is a reality to that. It is not culturally learned, since there is no such thing as cultural. It is not an environmental thing. There is a real basis to all of that. There is a basis to the hostility that one race feels toward another. There is a basis to the hostility that I have, with some hesitation, even mentioned to you, that under very most mechanical circumstances is inherent in sexual attraction. But rather than it being violence as you would think about it, I'd prefer that you think about it still on the basis of it being a matter of a dominant one or force and then a submissive one. But notwithstanding the fact that there is a molecular basis for all of these nationalistic, chauvinistic, jingoistic feelings, I am telling you that although it is necessary, it's required out in the ordinary world, that the French mistrust, if not dislike, the Germans. The Germans feel that way about the Poles. The Poles feel that way about the Russians. The Arabs feel that way about the Jews, and you know all the stories. That is necessary out in life, or it would not be going on. It is necessary And if you go far enough, you'll just suddenly feel it, you'll understand it. It just is. At the three-dimensional level, the reality behind all those words is a necessity. But for you people, for would-be real revolutionists, you cannot tolerate, it is poison, all feelings of exclusive racism, nationalistic feelings, cultural feelings of superiority. And I am not making a political statement, as you people know by now. I am quite delighted living where we live. I don't know of any reason I would move from this country. I am quite satisfied. But it is poison for you to let those feelings go from the chemical to the electrical, for you to actually think in some way how proud you are to be white, black, Jew, Christian, American, French, Spanish. It is poison. The real revolutionist has no allegiance. He has none. He cannot have any. An allegiance is a form of slavery. Allegiance is a form of continual slavery to your genes, to everyone's genes. It's poison. You should treat the electrified desire, that is, that you can finally think about it, for revenge as a kind of uncollectible debt, a kind of fungus that can never be eradicated, that there is no form of Clorox or Lysol spray that will take away this fungus. There is a chemical basis for revenge. There's a reality to it. Somewhat similar to me pointing out that there is a chemical basis, a red circuit basis for jealousy. But you cannot tolerate it, and you should not let it get in from the chemical up to the electrical level. Jealousy and revenge is very similar. There is a real basis for it. To believe that the rest of the world is going to give up revenge, no. It is the reality now, not the word. The reality behind so-called revenge is necessary out there to keep things turning. But for you to tolerate it, for you to let revenge, the desire for revenge, go from the chemical level to the electrical level, you think it. It becomes you. It becomes something that you thought. It becomes something that you believe, that you felt. You have poisoned yourself. You have allowed poison of a very specific kind that is important only to you, not your neighbor, not your family, not your culture, not your country, not your race. You have let poison that you could have stopped come back in your system because you cannot pay off that debt. If I didn't make that clear enough, you cannot get revenge once it becomes electrical. If it was simply chemical, you can satisfy that. I guess this will be a weird and unusual place enough to stop the tape here. If you could keep it at the chemical level, when you wanted revenge against somebody over here, you'd kill them. Now, that's it. But you'd have to be able to kill them and then not think about it. And of course, kill them and not get caught would help. I'll turn the tape. You cannot get revenge. Anybody here that has the potential to be a real revolutionary, well, now you know that. And it is not, well, you can't get it and then be satisfied. It's never what you thought it was. It's never what you imagined you would feel. Now, this has been noted, I am sure, through fairly routine government-based, that is the people-based, religions even. But they attribute this to the fact that, well, God told you not to seek revenge, and therefore when you went out and tried to get it, he showed you because he took away the sweetness. It's not what you imagined. They are noting the reality of it. You cannot get revenge. That was my little, at least 2.5D humor when I was saying real revenge would be possible, but you would have to keep it at the chemical level, that is, kill anybody that you wanted revenge against. Whatever they imagined or whatever the real affront initially committed, just kill them. But then don't ever think about it. But beyond that, once you think about it, once the chemical becomes electrical, once you have electrified the desire for revenge, then it can never be satisfied because it was not initially an electrical-based drive. And once it turns from the chemical to the electrical, like many, many other things, it can never be satisfied in the way that the electrical, that is, the yellow circuit, now thinks about it and believes it's part of its domain. But it's like you having a vitamin B deficiency, and you suddenly eat everything you can get your hands on, but it all turns out to be nothing but sweets and sugars. You may get full temporarily, but you will not cure that hunger. Once something there was a based chemically, was based in one of the circuits, falls into the hands of another circuit. And here we're talking about almost exclusively of things going from the lower levels into the yellow circuit, which of course is what I mean by things going from the chemical to the electrical, or them becoming electrified. Then they cannot be satisfied. The electrical can never be satisfied. The yellow circuits can never be satisfied with whatever you do. No matter how you go back and seek revenge against this person, it will never be satisfied that, no, that ain't it. We crippled him, we broke him, but that still ain't it. What's missing? I'll take his wife. You take his wife? No. I'll ruin his children. Yeah, I do that? No. Damn, what is it? It cannot be done, and there is a molecular reason. Life does not commit suicide. It's an uncollectible debt, and it is poison to try and collect it. Don't ever talk about health, wealth, or age. That's just a fact. I'm just telling you. I told you that before, and some of you, I said some of you I'd almost saved your life or you wouldn't be alive today. And I said, if not literally, some of you would no longer be vital. You would feel as though your ship had finally sailed out of port and it forgot to untie from the dock, and it stretched your patience for being alive and being you about as far. That's just a fact. I'm just telling you. I told you that before, and some of you, I said some of you I'd almost saved your life or you wouldn't be alive today. And I said, if not literally, some of you would no longer be vital. You would feel as though your ship had finally sailed out of port and it forgot to untie from the dock, and it stretched your patience for being alive and being you about as far as it could go. It would be that kind of life. You would be part of the real walking dead. And a couple of you, a handful of you, actually got that from me, this feeling, when I just stopped you, when I just told you, by God, don't talk about age ever again. And some of you might imagine there is a reality reflected out in life. There were some of you approaching that magic, bewitching hour of 40 years old. Fuck it. There is a molecular basis for that. That was not made up out in life. They're not just suddenly, I know it's a popular phrase now about middle-age crazes and that, but there is a molecular basis. There is a chemical basis of people feeling that when they hit about that age. So what? I gave some of you the immediate treatment. You just forget it. I mean, there it is. There's a chemical basis. And if you forget it, if you refuse to talk about it, if you refuse to let that chemical basis become electrical and you think about it, you put in words, I told you, it'll take care of it. And it will. Other people may go through that kind of craziness for years, and you can get over it no matter, once it hits you, you can get over it in a matter of weeks, maybe days. I hate to give ironclad time limits on my guarantees, but don't talk about it. Don't even say it to yourself that, my God, here I'm 40, and here's the kind of electrical pictures you can get. Whatever I've done, whatever I'm going to do in life, I've had it. I'm past. I didn't even think about it until now. I'm not at midpoint. I haven't gone up the hill for so many years now. It's down the hill. I was at the apex of the hill, God damn, 5 or 6 years ago, and I forgot to think about it. I'm past middle point. Especially the kind of life I've led. I had no idea I'd live this long. Terrible things I've done to myself. It's just this, and it's a real chemical-based feeling that I'm done for. I can't complain with the Hollywood titles of middle-aged crazy. It's a kind of molecular craziness. It varies somewhat from men to women. I've seen them both. You just can't talk about it. Now, under no circumstances should you poison yourself talking about your health in general. And by that, I do not mean anything ridiculous. That if I ask you to do something in here If I said, go help them carry this piano downstairs and you hurt your back last week, tell me. Point to your back or just say, I hurt my back. That's all you got to say. Everybody I know's hurt their back. I'm not going to throw you out. I'm not going to laugh. I'm not going to give you some kind of demerit. If I ask you to do something and you're just too weak to do it, that you've had the flu, you just say so. That is not what is entailed. That is not what I mean by saying do not talk about your health. And don't any of you people be childish enough anymore to write me notes, to tell me, to ask me, well, listen, about not talking about my health, well, why am I going to tell somebody if they ask me, even if it's not you, if somebody here in the group says, help us carry this piano, and my back's been real sore, tell them. But that's it. Or just point and go, ooh. Everybody here will understand. If they don't belong here. But do not discuss your health. It is not a hobby. And don't discuss your wealth. That is, don't discuss what you're up to in life and where you may be. Don't say to anybody, don't be standing at the line in Kmart and somebody say, Jesus, can you believe that sneakers here at Kmart for my kids have gone from $3.95 to $4.95? Do not engage in conversation on a personal basis of you saying, yeah, I know, I can hardly make it. Don't discuss your wealth or lack of it with anybody, not even your family. Just do not talk about your health, your wealth, and don't ever mention your age. Don't ever tacitly go along when somebody says, God, it's hell to be 50, isn't it? And everybody standing around goes, phew, and you go, don't do it. Just look off like you don't even know what 50 means. I don't care if you're stooped over and cannot stand up straight and look to be 80. Don't play. I'm telling you, do not play. Don't pretend to be special. As far as I'm concerned, that's just self-explanatory. Be alert. Be even skeptical, but do not be cynical. Still stuck with the inherent limitations of words and me trying to disassemble man in a way that is not limited to a binary dismemberment, but still left with words. I'll point out that cynical, I can't recall an absolute dictionary definition, but cynical is in some way tied to already established opinions, that you don't believe what somebody has said. You do not believe what somebody predicted will come to pass. You don't believe what somebody has promised you that they will do. It is based upon some kind of already established feeling or belief. That is not what I mean by be alert or even skeptical. If you will expand alert, if you'll try to at least get it toward the fourth dimension, that's sufficient. You don't even have to say skeptical. Some of you may think skeptical is synonymous with cynical. And as far as I remember, it's not literally, and I certainly personally don't mean it that way. Skeptical would be what I intended is the way you're looking, the way you're listening, the way you're viewing some situation is not based upon some already established belief or opinion that you're about to be took, or that you can't trust these people. Being skeptical is simply trying to listen with 3 ears, not trusting anyone's biography, their autobiography, to be anything other than fiction, and they can't help it. While understanding that no one's word is any better than your word, if you're ordinary. And if you're anywhere past ordinary, you know what your word is worth at the ordinary level. So that's not being cynical. It's not based on an opinion or a belief. It's based on a FF. A frigging fact. But you notice I did a little self-censorship because the next one I wrote down was, don't curse. Every week on these tapes, for years, I believe it's safe for me to say, get me right through my memory, that each and every week, at least once, I say, damn, hell, fuck. But you shouldn't curse unless you mean it. And of course, I Don't mean it whatsoever. Not here. That's the only reason I do it. And I may stop, just to show you that I can take some of my own advice. But then again, remember this, I don't have to. I don't need my own advice. But you should not, really. And I don't hear it going on around here. But you shouldn't curse. It's poison. There's a real reason. Not moralistic. Not because it'll hurt your social standing. But you shouldn't curse. It's just a form of letting yourself molecularly be pushed around. It's a form of hostility. It's a form of seeking revenge. Goddamn clock. It's not the clock's fault you overslept. Or to kick poor old dirt because you turned your ankle. To spit on the ground because you tripped. It's all a form of curse. Be brief and elusive, if not invisible. Self-explanatory again. Always remember time and the incomplete nature of the 3D world. Save time, I'll just refer to these as SEs. Self-explanatory. Or OHH. OAH. Obvious as HELL. Don't repay friendship with criticism. I said a little bit about that a few weeks back. I was saying that would have to be probably the SHITTIEST form of payment to give to somebody that gave you some affection, somebody that gave you some friendship. Worse yet, somebody that laid you once, twice, many times. And for your payment to be, hon, could I tell you something for your own good? That has got to be the S-word, adjective, form of possible repayment you could give anybody. Is God, you are so enjoyable to me sensually. Instead of me just offering you a cigarette, let me offer you some advice. Always smile just before you speak. I'm going to leave that one because I may come back and expound on that sometime. But that is a real fact. You don't have to do it externally. Circumstances could be such in the ordinary world that you might not do it externally. But I am telling you, this is a continuing fact that you would understand on your own, given enough time, given enough luck, given enough electricity to get into your own system, that you would know that every time, just before you speak, period, just before you speak, you should always smile, whether it shows or not. Every time, just before you speak, smile. Don't bother with anybody who talks about a capital G God. That should be, I guess, self-explanatory. After all the times I've talked, it's not an attack on your own religion. I'm about to run out of my string. I'm about to run out of the energy. That is, I'm about to run out of any lingering feelings that any of you should feel that this is important enough for me to even speak of anymore. Religions, people's belief in religions, your past molecular belief in apparent ties to religions of your father, some religion you tried to adopt personally later on in your life. It is all, vis-a-vis this activity, it is all of no more consequence, no more meaning than whether at one time you joined the Young Communist League, whether at one time in a weak drunken moment you signed up and pledged to be a Republican, or that you were a Boy Scout. It is meaningless. Well, let me wrap up. You believing still, perhaps, without analyzing it, without seeing it, that you are reading a book of some importance, or you're hearing somebody speak in person, on television, whether it be contemporarily or whether it be from the historical past, and this person continually, well, one time even, refers to big G letter God in any way other than historical, if they're just making some kind of historical reference. If they speak seriously about a capital letter G God, let me just wrap it up for you. I'm telling you, just ignore it. Ignore them. You're not going anywhere. That does not mean that you can't get something from reading a book, say, by somebody tied to that. But to believe that this book is going to, in some way, as a coherent unveiling of some truth, you're wrong. I'm just wrapping up for you once and for all, even if I do go back and make some mention sometime in the future. Anybody talks about capital letter G God, you're poisoning yourself by taking it in toto. Them, any idea they have, any book, whether it be a person I'm talking about now or some group, some apparent system. You're poisoning yourself to let any attraction become electrified, for you to let yourself be entertained by it, for you to entertain what they're apparently saying. It is worse than a dead-end street. It's a dead-end street that runs into a nuclear dump. I did that to try to make it sound worse than the other things I've been saying about its poison. This is super poison. Pursue your hobby diligently. I mention this periodically, and it is serious. It is not just to perhaps placate people or to make you think that all this is not serious. If you personally have a real hobby, is you should pursue it. You should be diligent. You should stick with it. You should not ignore it, because it can go away. You apparently begin to lose interest. And if it was a real hobby that you had, not to give you the blues, but you might live to regret that you did not pursue it. Eat, run, smile, and sleep is needed. You would think that's self-evident, isn't it? Whatever you need to eat, notwithstanding what I set up as our few little dietary rules, whatever you need to eat at any particular time, do so. If you got medicine you need to take your medicine. That's part of eating. If you get exercise, you should be finding some sort of personal movement that you like that I may have never mentioned. Something I've got to ask. Have any of you, don't answer me, it's a rhetorical question, have any of you ever thought this, that based upon your extensive past reading of religious ideas, the history of religious people, prophets, great philosophers, and everything you've imagined, but especially everything you've ever read, have any of you ever noticed this and then thought about it? That notwithstanding the fact, especially when you're real tired, you just got through doing the numbers, you went and you ran your hours for the day because of me. All right, besides me telling everybody that is one of the basic rules, you got to get X amount of exercise every day. Have any of you noticed that nowhere else in the history of weirdness, metaphysics, religion, nobody else, no other would-be so-called prophet, teacher, guru, was ever witnessed to ever engaged in any kind of exercise, nor did any of them ever recommend it. Surely some of you have thought that at a real bad moment. Real tired and hot and sweaty, and you're doing something that you could trace back to me, and nobody else ever did that. I just wonder if any of you ever thought that. I did once. I was real hot and, well. Keep your hands off your parents. but call home. I know that there would be some of you that still do not find that to be self-evident, but that is so basic, that is so dangerously fraught with poison that you should just take my absolute word for it. Keep your hands off your parents. Forget, strike out all imagined, or you may think they're real, debts that you think your parents owe you. Every mistake they ever made as you see it, just forget it. Mark it off as the ultimate bad debt. Refuse to ever think about it again. But if they're interested, call home. Don't do interviews. Don't reveal anything about yourself. Hug them over the phone. But keep your hands off your parents. It's a poisonous attempt to, although with ordinary people it's all right and it's necessary. But with you it's a poisonous attempt of reversing a flow of energy that has already been spent. There is no nourishment left in what appears to be the continuing kind of psychological, mental, emotional ties you to your parents on the basis of what is owed to whom. You have got to literally perceive it and act as though there are no debts. Never were any debts, don't even know what you're talking about. If your parents ever tried to apologize to you for anything, or to ask you, do you still hold such and such against me? You can't even hear it. You should hug and kiss all dogs if you can. Everybody understands that, except those of you that can't do it or don't see the need, and that's, I won't say it's all right, but that's the way it is. The rest of you, don't get in debt. That's a good one. Look up whenever possible. All of you should know that. Of course, except when it's raining real hard. Regardless of what your high school class chose and sang as their graduation when you walk through a storm, don't believe that about hold your head up high. Especially if you got a nice sized snize at the wrong angle, well, don't do interviews. We've been through that enough. Ask all birds. I noticed that some of you tittered, but when you're going along, don't do it, of course, like any of this. Don't do it out loud if somebody's going to hear you. But as you're out walking along or jogging, and most people don't seem to notice, but birds all the time flying and landing on power lines, on fences, and they're seen the other side of the road and they'll take off. Just trust me, you ought to speak to birds. Don't try to hug birds, of course, or catch them. But you ought to speak to them. And the main thing that I have found that seems to be the way is I went ahead and I gave it to you when I read them through the first time. I gave it to you verbally and say, hey, are you from around here? Or, do you live here, wherever they are? I don't know why it seems like the thing. It's worked for me. You just say, are you from around here? Even if they're flying off, say it to them. Always act and think of acting. Never talk of things already done. Never talk about things that you might do. All of these, I assume that you see that I consider to be self-evident. Do not publicly drop a habit. Don't do it. If you do it, it's the same thing as doing an interview. Do not think, that is, do not electrify any chemical knowledge you have of any genetic shortcoming you may have. If you were born with a bad leg, if you were born with one eye, what do you want? Do not electrify it. Chemically, you know it. Chemically, the rest of us will know it. Do not electrify it. Do not think about it. From the depths of wisdom, I would say that if you understood it correctly, I guess verbally, the conclusion for the time being for this one would be, you know it, we know it, and the kind of philosophical words of wisdom I was going to say spring to my lips or want to is, so what? What are you going to talk about? What is there to think about? Unless you can grow a new eyeball, unless you can will your foot to straighten out, whatever your problem is, unless you can make your apparently inherited weak back, unless you can produce in it the kryptonic strength of Superman, what's there to think about? Live each day as though you were going to die yesterday. You should only, if this ever has a possibility of occurring, you should only speak the word literally, to say the word love to somebody that you really know, that you are sure that they know really what you mean. You shouldn't say it to anybody else. You know it's just a word, it's just a sound. You should not say it unless you are positive, as far as you can be, that the person you're saying it to really knows what you mean by it. Don't keep useless or ugly stuff. And notice I didn't say don't get useless or ugly stuff. There is nothing to be gained by demanding the impossible. But do not keep it once you realize that this is either useless or ugly. Do not keep it. Are we talking about possessions or something else? Don't bug me, son. I'm trying to read through this. Figure it out for yourself. Be poor only by choice. I'm going to give this just a minute because I want to point out, I've said things that at times may have sounded as though it was, if not facetious, semi-facetious, about not wasting your time in the ordinary sense of trying to be rich and famous and etc. There is nothing wrong with being rich and famous, per se. As the kind of effort it takes to get there is another matter, generally speaking. But on a slightly different approach pattern, there is nothing wrong with being poor. If, I'm talking to you people now, if it is, as far as can be, if it is a decision on your part, that is, by poor I mean, that you do, as far as ordinary work, labor, involvement in playing out in the horizontal traffic of the ordinary world, that you do only what is necessary to feed you, to keep you housed. In other words, you just do the minimal amount of work. Do my stuff you don't want to do, that's work. You only do just what is necessary to keep you alive and to keep your hobby going. Now that is all right if apparently, by all apparent, from all views that you can muster, that it is your decision and is not something that you feel as though you can, yellow circuit-wise, blame on circumstance, that I'm poor and I don't like it. If you don't use the word poor. I'm not as flush as I would like to be, but it's not my fault. I want to be. If you're satisfied being non-flushed, and as far as is reasonable from a 3D view, from everyone that you can get at ordinary level of consciousness, that this satisfies me. That from some view you could say that I am close to the poverty level, if not at it, but I am satisfied, and I could do otherwise tomorrow. That as far as you can tell, I'm doing exactly just as much as I want to do right now, and that's it. Then to be that kind of, quote, poor, no problem. There is a problem if you feel as though there is something to blame. Then you're sidetracked. And whatever your position is of being poor, being less than well off, you should do something about it because it is poisoning you. I could deal with this in a much more complex and lengthy manner because a piece of this hits a bunch of you people in here and in other cities. You should be acting right or you won't feel right. And if acting right in your case means that you're living right now at the poverty level and you are continually electrifying it, that you think about all the time, that you're mumbling about it, you're letting these impulses become your own thoughts about, boy, I wish I was richer, I'm mad about it, why I can't get a job paying me immediately $200,000 a year. That, don't worry about us trying to, or you trying to judge it from some other standard. If that is the way you are now feeling and thinking, that's all we have to deal with. That is sufficient for me to tell you this. You are not acting right. And you can do better. And you must do better to see if indeed that was what was needed. But not to simply sit back and say, well, I am going downhill more and more financially every day. That is going in debt. That is simply a form of it. And it is poison. If that is indeed the way that you now feel and think. But if there, from every possible view, if you are in your position and you're not blaming circumstance, and that you can live at just the level of doing a minimal amount of work, then don't look for any imaginary suffering to put on top of it. That is not poisonous. Always remember how funny you really are. I don't think we should stop and try to rub our collective faces in that, should we? Don't give sex a second thought. All right, what I mean by that, sex properly with you people should fall within the realm of acting, not the alternative, which is, let's all say it, thinking of acting. You should not give sex a second thought. I just use a fairly common figure of speech by saying second thought. You shouldn't give sex thought one. If you did not, then none of you would have what you, at line level consciousness, what many of you think of as having some, either minor or perhaps gross, sexual problem. If you never gave sex thought one, if it was simply action and not thinking of action, none of you would have a, quote, sexual problem. None of you would have a sexual, is there anything less than a problem? At least any of you try to weasel out of it. You would never suffer over sex. You would never do anything sexually that you felt guilty about or suffered over, which is not the problem, I might point out. You would never think about anything sexually that then you felt guilty about if all you did was treat sex as you should treat it, as an activity and not an area to think about activity. Simple, is it not? I said, isn't it not, son? You should not give sex a second thought. If you could do that, then any of you that think that you have any sexual problems, any of you that thought that you have any potential sexual problems, you might do something really terrible this coming St. Quantum's Day in front of me and everybody else, or that it might slip out someday when you're drunk. You would not have any of that, for any of you that still think it's a problem, or any of you that's ever done anything and you think, God, what if he ever found out? What if I get drunk and admit it? Or that you feel as though once a day you worry about it and think, God, I shouldn't have done that. If you never gave sex a second thought, just as all real four-dimensional activity, real revolutionary activity is, it destroys the past. You don't need a priest. You don't need confession. You need privileged information. And you need to act on it. There'd be nothing to suffer over, nothing to feel guilty about. If you act when you should act and then think about acting when that is proper, you will never need a psychiatrist, Jewish mother, a pat on the back, a note from home, well, you wouldn't need that anyway. If you're lonely, stop it. I know that some, and then some more of you, go through periods that you feel lonely, and sometimes you feel as though that you have an unusual distance now between you and ordinary people out in life, and it's hard to find a new sexual partner and this and that. If you're lonely, stop it. Do something. You don't have to limit your life. I've never insinuated you did, especially your apparent social life, to people in here. And if you really feel lonely and you feel as though that you've tried everything, then notice this. You haven't. Go and do something new. Go do something that the lonely part of you would never do. Look in the little paper. There are these little throwaway free papers of community activities available in all cities. And look down and pick out something that you, the lonely you, would never do. Look down that it's this week's social event of Alcoholics Anonymous. Go there. Pretend to be one. Or find one that says the social club for the month of single parents. Even if you don't have a child, go there. Or if you find one, single parents of alcoholics, or alcoholic single parents, or single parent of an ex-alcoholic. The annual or the monthly dance of the alcoholic deaf and dumb people. Go there. And I'm saying this specifically not just for the sake of doing something new and different, which is always in order, but really, if you feel lonely, pick out a group of people that you, that is the lonely you, would have never visited, and go there with them and try and join in. Establish a secret hermitage. Everyone knows what a hermitage is, don't you? That's a place where hermits hang out. In the way in which I phrased that sentence, when I said hermits hang out, I don't mean plural. Hermits. So a hermitage is a place where a hermit hangs out. You should establish one. And need I say it should be a secret place. What's the fun? Of course, I guess some of you girls may have missed this, but you'll probably understand or hear me. What's the fun of having a clubhouse if everybody knows where it is? That's no clubhouse. That's no fun. And it's not profitable. A hermitage has to be secret. And there has to only be room for one hermit, or else you got a hermit club. And we've already been through this, folks. You can't, don't believe that you're a hermit if you're a member of the National Association of Hermits. Or even just the Georgia, New York, or California chapter. You're not a hermit. Every time I make a joke, apparently, about a hermit's club, I don't guess I've told this in several years, I still like the one. Somebody told me that they wrote off, found a list of strange organizations, 2 or 3 some years ago, and one of them, in another state, they showed me the letter that they had sent, and they were asking for information. They wrote off to a bunch of weird places, you know, Masons and yogas here and there. But there was this place known, and I can't really quote the full name, but the name was something like the Infinite, All-Encompassing Cosmic Brotherhood of the Eternal Followers of All Spirit-Filled Teachings that go on forever. The name was almost that long. Post office such and such, Lake Tahoe, California. And it came back out of business. That's my joke for the month. Stay free from debt. Enjoy what you really enjoy with no restraint and no guilt. And I mean that if you really enjoy it, that's what we're talking about now. You got to know it. If you enjoy it, I don't care whether it's listening to music, going to the ballet, reading books, strumming on your guitar, whittling, sitting on the back porch and seeing how many different spots on the ground that you can spit. Something that you enjoy in life, you should do it. And you should do it with no restraint. You should do it with no feeling of guilt that you're wasting your time, that you should be doing something else. But also, I didn't add to in the first read-through, you should periodically also find the pleasure and the enjoyment of periodically giving it up. Periodically. Don't ever try to give up something for good or you're a reformer. It's only one step from there to Jesus, being a Christian or a Muslim or religious or ordinary or duck-faced. But periodically, you should find out, taste, remind yourself in some cases the taste of enjoyment of periodically giving up that which you enjoy. It's a molecular as everything else if it's real pleasure. It's not a spiritual sojourn into the world of hair shirts. It is a real chemical enjoyment. Do not let the blues into your blue circuit. That was so obvious I started not to even read it after I wrote it down. Always remember the joy and the energy of good yellow circuit food. How often you've all reminded me of that. Do not waste anything. I have said about all that I cared to in the last, whether once or twice I've mentioned it in the last few months. Humanity is not going to use up life. We're not going to destroy the planet through throwing beer cans on the highway, even though you should not participate. And I don't hold it against you if you don't like seeing beer cans on the highway. There are things that I think in the spectrum of visual light that would strike your eyes and my eyes that may appear to be, by almost anyone's definition, more attractive than an empty Schlitz can. Humanity is not going to destroy the planet, but you personally should not be wasting and putting a burden, no matter it's just your little pogita, just your little bit of one beer can. You leaving on lights when nobody's using them. You not reusing things. You having a pencil that's still this long and you drop it in the floor and you just walk over and go ahead and kick it in the garbage rather than pick it up because you got 10 more. You shouldn't do that. There is a basis for it, a real basis. There is a molecular basis for you people. Anything that can still be used, any way in which you can conserve energy and matter, even though it's not going anywhere, but apparently you can, in your one instance right here, you can apparently conserve it. You can reuse this. You can stop the waste of it, of leaving the light on when you're not in the room. I am telling you, not your father. I'm not Ralph Nader. I am telling you there is a molecular basis for not, in just your little instance, that I'm not going to debate with you whether life even knows it at what you would call a conscious level. But you should not be participating in putting even that little bit more strain on life. You should not, really. Debate no one. Is that too fancy? Do not debate people. Is that too long? Don't debate. Is that not homey enough? Don't debate nothing. Is that about covered it? If you are uncontrollably serious, this is a more clinical way to put it, if you are seriously serious, then be it known that you're on the wrong track. You have been temporarily derailed. You're attempting to look out the port side, and in your case, there ain't no port side. Don't think about stuff that has only two sides. That is a real jack fact. I don't care what it is. Goodness, morality, politics, fiscal affairs, mergers, plane crashes, your mother's health, your shoe size. Don't think about anything that only has two sides. Don't do it. It's worse than a waste of time, which is bad enough. But it is a form of poison, that you are spending what is indeed the only currency you have here. That is the time you've got here, the amount of energy that is mechanically already available to you, and you're spending it thinking about letting chemical energy become electrical in your case, which is one of the walking around definitions of a human, as opposed to a white pine or a Malamute, is you are wasting that energy thinking about stuff that is fruitless. If it's only got two sides, don't think about it. There's nothing to think about. The only thing to think about is, hey, that's only got two sides. Next. At that level, you've already got it whipped. It's the rest of the world is going to forever debate it, which they've already been doing. But at that level, at least you got that one thing down. Everybody else is still debating the nature of, well, here's one, good and evil. If for nothing else, if you can see, hey, that's got two sides, you understand more than Billy Graham, the Pope, St. Augustine of Hippo. I noticed he never used that full name on his business cards. Not that I blame him. Don't waste your time thinking about stuff that only has two sides, and I don't care what it is. If it seems to be a pressing matter that you have in your personal life, something you need to figure out, you're wasting your time to think about it at all. If it's only got two sides, that's all you need to know for right now. That's more than everybody else knows involved with it. That's more than anybody knows on this planet. If you see that, giving it my best shot right now, this problem, this situation, this question has got two sides, well, that's enough. It's going nowhere. There's nothing else right now to understand. That says it. Don't make me say anything more. That says it. That covers it for now. Anything above that is, God, I wish there was some way to say stronger, a waste of time without cursing. Do not be angry at a clock if you oversleep. I got into that one already, if you noticed. Don't try and jump up and down on planet Earth because you tripped. That's not a psychological commentary. It's not a joke. It is real. And everybody is wired up to do it. It's a part of being civilized. It's part of the proof of being civilized. It's part of the proof that you have higher circuits working. Is to wake up finally and try to get out of bed and you realize the alarm's been going off for the last 30 minutes. The clock rang when I put it, but you curse the clock. Whether you overtly say, blank you clock, doesn't matter. You curse the clock. You turn your molecular energy somewhere else, as you should if you're ordinary. But for you people, you cannot do that. There is a true danger in it. To curse something, to blame something else. Even if I suddenly, as I am wont to say, jumped out of the bushes and said, aha, you did it. And you go, ah, come on, you know I wasn't really blaming the clock. I know it was me overslept. But you let the chemical reality of finally opening an eye and realize it's 30 minutes past the time I should have already left. And you let energy, whether you say anything or not, you let the energy flow toward that clock. And then you might say, wait a minute, if you could really read my circuits, you'd know I was not blaming the clock. And that could be true. You might not have electrified the word actually clock. The circumstances. But what if you say, well, you you're not really reading my circuits, reading my mind. Absolutely correct. I could say, all right, you're simply being hostile, right? You're mad. You're upset. You're frightened. You may get fired. You are engaged in a negative energy flow. Okay, that's right. So far, you got me. And it's directed anywhere but toward the source of where the few must lay as being the feet of the blame. Not the land of the free, the feet of the blame. Then if you heard all that, you'd have to go, and you shouldn't do that. Of course, I didn't write this one in, but you shouldn't oversleep. That should be one of the rules. Of course, you've got to put oversleep in quotation marks. You should not oversleep anywhere, in any way, in any manner. If you decide, I'll give it 7:30, you got to give it 7:30. Either that, or you have got to fully been non-committed when you said, well, I'll give it 7:30. That's okay, as long as you completely are insincere. And you can tell, your roommate or somebody, yes, I'll be up at 7:30. As long as you fully don't mean it, then go hit the bed. But if you meant it, don't oversleep. If you let the feeling of being, quote, sorry for yourself, if you let those feelings become electrified, if you let the chemical basis, and there is one, for people who apparently, the word is, now there's a reality, but the words are, the description is, so-and-so seems to periodically or even constantly feel sorry for herself, himself. If you let those chemical feelings become electrified of feeling sorry for yourself, what you have ceased to do right then, as long as it is in action in your system, you have ceased to have a self. Which if I was going to give a psychological description, which I'm not, I could point out what a self-fueling Tasmanian devil that is. There's no end to the enjoyment, because life has told such people, this is fun to feel sorry for yourself, and sure enough it is. We're running out of tape. So I guess I could promise to come back and do this next week or some other time, and I will. I'm promising it, which means that I will definitely do it, or else, I'm telling you now, I am being totally insincere. When I'm totally insincere, as long as we're here talking about binary affairs, that doesn't mean that I am staying here right now and deciding, all right, I'm being totally insincere. I'll never come back to this again, or I'm saying I'm totally being sincere, and I will. No matter what happens, no matter what I might suddenly think of that I want to talk about next week, I'm going to cover this. Being totally insincere turns those two things like into real teeny-weeny little muffins. little bitty cookies like the Cookie Monster just eat and not even know about. It's neither one of those. Or, if you prefer, it's both of those plus another cookie that you can't see. It's all three of them. So you're being totally insincere. That what I mean is not either being sincere or not sincere, because either way one of those would either be true or false, and so therefore they wouldn't either be correct. So I'm still going to have to stop here since we're running out of tape. Mentioned to you people out of town, it's coming up. As I told you, I'll let you know something more specifically as soon as I decide what it is, but it's about to become the second most important aspect, that here in Atlanta and in the other cities there's going to be, just as soon as I tell you, and it's coming up, going to be an immediate requirement that you've got to double the size of the group. It's got to happen here. The blood's already started beginning to go, times are at such a point that you have got to be prepared to do that. I'm going to stop everything, whether it be here or in some other city, getting these tapes. The most important, as always, will remain your own effort for yourself. I won't ever change that. I wouldn't let you fall into another imaginary category. You've got to look after your own interest here. I'll see to that. But right underneath that is going to become that each person is going to have to duplicate themselves. It's just reached one of those times again. It may be the time now for this to finally go public in some way, or it may not be. But at the very least, all of you people are going to have to duplicate yourself, or else I'll throw you out individually, or if it's widespread enough, that is a failure to duplicate yourself, I'm going to break it all up. Is that leaving on a high note? No. As I was reading through, there was one, I guess you'll forgive me, I'll jump and I'll finish with this. There was one, if you recall, I read that if the chemical in you does not become electrified, then you don't think it. That is, if you don't let what appears to be a thought go from the chemical to the electrical. And as I read that before, I was thinking it reminded me of a play. If you will pardon me for doing this, if you begin to realize that the kind of thoughts that you have, that you just let mechanically happen, fills you full of regret, almost makes you moan about that you did it. And the play I was thinking about, if you let this happen, was like, forgive me, is moaning becomes electrical. Forgive me.